Happy Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm a little in upheaval, packing my stuff, getting ready to jump on a plane to Bangkok with hundreds of listeners of this podcast. If you're not joining us this year, we hope you will next. But listening to this podcast is the next best thing. And I've been wanting to do this one for a long time. So here we go. This is one's going to get the entrepreneurial juices flowing because we are going to see incredible execution today. So here's the question. If you have an expertise, what is the simplest way to turn it into wealth? Of course, there's many options, but one that is incredibly popular and effective is consulting and coaching. We're talking about keeping it simple with one clear marketing channel, one clear offer. So today's guest, Itamar Marani, is going to lay out the actual playbook as how he progressed and built an incredible business as a coach and an expert consultant. So how can you turn that expertise that you have into hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars of personal income? We're also going to touch on a lot of mindset stuff that unlocked these levels as he systematically leveled up his business. We're going to talk about pricing. We're going to talk about positioning. We're going to talk about the progression from one-on-one coaching and consulting to group consulting, how you can do that effectively, how you can market the whole thing. The punchline here is he's actually been able to go back to one-on-one and charge six figures for annual engagement. So how do you go from I'm just got this narrow expertise to charging six figures a year? I want to point you to Itamar's excellent new book. It's called Elite Performance, the Israeli Special Ops Mindset System to Win the War Within and Achieve Audacious Goal. The link to the book is in the show notes. I read it before this interview. It's fantastic. We're going to focus a lot on business here. How do you turn that expertise into an incredible profit engine? So I'm excited to share this one, and I'll see you guys on the back end of this incredible Bangkok event. Thanks everyone who's filled out the survey and emailed us in the past few weeks. We'll be out of the office for the next week, but we'll look forward to touching base with you next Thursday morning. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Itamar Marani. The way you've designed this thing is incredible, but you just launched a book. So I want to ask you about, I read it, it's great. I want to hear just a little bit about the experience of the early readers reading it. And what did they latch on to that surprised you out of the book?
It's interesting. The early readers, most of them were actually alumni of the coaching program. So they were kind of familiar with the material. And their main feedback was that this reads like a textbook, the original version of it. They're like, dude, where are all the stories? Where's all the interesting stuff from special operations, undercover? Where's all that? And for me, initially, I didn't feel like that was the point of it, so to speak. My goal was to help people, not to talk about myself. Mm-hmm. And I had to honestly have a couple interventions, so to speak, from friends and beta readers to be like, no. You actually sharing about yourself is what creates the connection with the reader. And that's what enables people to then say, okay, I trust this human being, and now I'm open to listening to this stuff and actually learning it. And so that was the main block where I thought this was great. It's so so concise, so just clean information. They're like, no. We want stories as well. We want the interesting stuff. And I think that was the main progression from probably the first beta readers to the finished product, adding a lot of stories, like all the, the situation with Al-Qaeda that I escaped, all the stuff in the military, all that kind of jazz, and just weaving that in there.
The book opens up with you getting your undercover post blown, which is a pretty badass way to open a book. So well done there. So we'll get to some of the book stuff here in a bit, but I kind of want to go back. I am very impressed by what you built, and
thank you.
I want to get the sense of how you designed it. A lot of us are curious about this business model. What do you call the business model you've employed? And can you bring us back to the original sparks, maybe people that you saw doing it that inspired you to do the same?
So it's interesting. The original spark was that I had no idea that this business model was available. My story that I think I might have shared with you this in the past, that for a while after I left the world of special operations, I went into the private sector and I was head of security for a Russian billionaire and his mega yacht. And at a certain point, I was like, I don't like this life anymore. And I picked up the 4-hour work week, and then I said, I can start a marketing agency. So I did that, and I quit the job, started a marketing agency.
What kind of stuff were you doing for the market? I'm just curious about the marketing agency. Well, it's interesting because we talk about on the show, you can start a marketing agency in a couple of days, right? So how did that go?
So I was already a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and I thought, okay, this could be an easy in to other gym owners. They're like, I'm a Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Let me just get you students, And it made sense on the surface, but the reality was that these were people that were almost problem unaware. Forget about solution unaware. They never spent money on ads before. So you have to convince them, hey, marketing is a good thing. Then this is how much you should market. Then it's okay. Listen, if we actually broke even on the first month, but these clients are going to stick with you for about 2 years on average, this is a great LTV. So it was a lot of challenges that we weren't working with business people. And it was already one of those lessons that I learned, like, don't work with people who aren't business people. It just makes life harder. It doesn't need to be that way. It was a big, big lesson that, like, I wanted to help them. I had an easy in, but it was an easy in, but there was no, like, pot of gold at the end of this rainbow, so to speak.
We called that the knowledge gap and the efficiency gap, but I think it's a little bit easier just to break it. If you're trying to educate a market, I think it's really appealing psychologically to educate a market. It's like the low-hanging fruit. You can make a lot of progress if you have a coffee with one gym owner and you just rock their world if they're receptive to the message because they haven't heard about internet marketing and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the counterintuitive thing for me was to realize that, oh, wow, like if they don't have a previous practice of investing in this kind of stuff, it's bad times for you as a business owner to get involved at that educational moment unless you have enormous scale.
I really agree with you. For me, was that, to be honest, when I reflect back, I think I was insecure about my business acumen. So just being able to talk to people who had no business acumen at least overcame that. And it wasn't a strategic thought about like what could be the wisest business decision. It was probably more of an emotional one of where do I feel like I can kind of be okay, so to speak. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people. It's not a logical decision, but it's an emotional one. Like I said, it also feels really good. Like, oh, I got to like impart knowledge. I'm very knowledgeable. Great. Yay me. But at the end of the day, it doesn't help with the bank account, so to speak. And that's the goal of the business.
Gotcha. A theme that will come up quite a few times in this conversation. It does seem like, generally speaking, you see a lot of people with wide influence or have a message like yours, for example, like maybe a David Goggins or like these people that it typically, if you work backwards, it started with this narrow, especially in the business space, it started with a narrow problem set, B2B. And then as they gain cash flow and momentum and they're able to stay in the marketplace longer, they're able to broaden their message and then get into more of the broad educational game versus like tactical efficiencies, like we are going to take this business and get it from A to B sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. So you're running the marketing agency, you're selling to gym owners who do not have marketing budgets.
Yeah. And it's a grind, like it's working. It worked well enough for me to get into the DC. Let's put it that way, to reach that minimum, but it wasn't lighting the world on fire. And then I turned to Catalina, who was the community manager back, I think 2018, 2019. And I asked her if I could give a talk at DC BKK 2019 about my lessons from special operations, about how to deal with stress and make good decisions under a lot of pressure. And I gave the talk. It was very well received. And at the end of it, I just raised my hand. Like that was the whole intention the whole time, to be at the end of it, to be able to say, guys, by the way, this is what we're doing. This is my marketing agency these days. I know there's a lot of you guys in the room that are 7 figures or 8 figures, are a lot more successful than I am. So if this provided any value for you, I would be really grateful to hear any perspective you have on what we could be doing differently and what I could be doing differently. And that was it. And then about a dozen people came at the end of the talk and they're like, all right, so here's our recommendation for you. Stop doing the marketing and do the coaching thing. And it was such a blind spot of mine that my initial response to them was like, no, I don't want to coach jiu-jitsu anymore. I'm done with that. And I thought that's what they meant by coaching. And they were like, no, you could do business coaching. To which I responded, that is a thing? And they said, yes. And basically, like, that's kind of how it started from DC BKK 2019, completely without any expectation or thought that this is where it would go.
When you heard that information, how did you educate yourself up? What were some models that you started to look to that inspired you in the early days for how it could get done?
This is thanks to the DC. I said I want to be a coach, so I looked to a couple people that were doing it. And if you remember Emil Goliath, the really big guy.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Me, him, and Tom Kent formed a little mastermind. And at the time, they were both much, much further ahead than I was. Like I was just basically starting out, which also was like, it's interesting they want to work, like do a mastermind with me because I'm obviously just starting out. But they were very generous. Like Emil shared his entire like process, how he does things, how it works. And I said, okay, this looks like a blueprint. It could take me at least further than I am right now with this marketing agency, and let's go for it. So I basically just started doing a lot of one-on-ones, and I was very fortunate that I delivered a good product and more people wanted to talk about it and told about their friends, and that's kind of how we grew. And Emil also gave me a great piece of advice at the beginning when I was thinking about marketing. He was like, no. Right now, your best marketing is delivering phenomenal results for people. Because if you do that, that's how word spreads in this stuff. It's a really high trust business model, the coaching model. It's not like you're selling, a low ticket thing on Amazon, like drop shipping or whatever it may be. So he's like, create really good results for people. And that's what's going to build a trust. It's going to allow your business to grow. And that's kind of how it got started. Then I also, when I got to a certain point where my calendar was full, that's when I reached out to a coach who kind of helped people structure their group programs. And that's kind of how also the arena or group program came about. And it's kind of this iterative process of just trying to deliver really good results. What's a way they can do it in scale? And the book is where it is right now, is like as far as the scale.
You talk about like these proven, reliable pathways. And I think you're demonstrating one. The first is getting into a trusted group who have a lot to share with you. Maybe you could comment on the idea that people have a lot of insecurities around that. They'll say, well, I don't have $1 million business. Tom Kent has $1 million business. Why would he allow me to be in his mastermind? Do you have a sense for how you can get into those masterminds if you don't have similar business success?
I think a mental frame that's served me really well. So for example, in jiu-jitsu, if I was training in a room where I was actually tapping most of the people, I was like, this is a problem. I'm beating most of the people in the training room. I always recognized that when that happened in the tournaments, I wouldn't do as well because I wasn't being challenged. And it developed a sort of patterning, a wiring in my brain that if I'm actually at the place where I'm one of the best guys, this is not good for me. So the inverse of that is also that unless I'm at a place where I feel out of my depth, I need to find that place. That's where I'm going to win. So it's first off having that mindset that like, if you're feeling out of your depth, good. And if you're not feeling out of your depth, that's a problem because you're not actually going to grow. Now, with that, there's always something unique you can offer. Like I think even with Tom and Emil at the time, and this was during COVID, when COVID just hit, the majority of training in special operations is how to deal with uncertainty in a changing environment and stay calm. So even though I didn't have the business acumen to provide, I could provide them a lot of those frameworks. But like, hey guys, like this is a time where you can actually provide a lot of support for your clients, where everyone's seeking a bit of guidance, a bit of leadership. So you can always have that unique angle. There's something unique that you can provide. And if there isn't, work your butt off and find that and make that happen. It's like, even if someone, what I found like is a lot more successful than me in, let's call it even business, which is a very broad term. Maybe there's one area of business where you can be really helpful to him. Maybe like you can be really good at sales. Maybe you could be really good at branding. And even though they're on a general level much more successful or further ahead than you, there's probably one vertical where you excel more, which is literally like what we built our whole business upon. Like I work with people that are much more capable than me in business. They have much more knowledge than me. They have much more skill, much more resources. The only vertical where I am better than them, so to speak, and have something to offer to them is mental performance and mindset. And that's it. And I feel like the more I've actually been comfortable saying that to people, the more they've also been comfortable just going into it, so to speak.
So let's talk about that time frame then when you're doing one-on-one. Can you bring me back to that moment when you're having the first sessions? How are you charging for it? When's that kind of moment when you're like, this is, how many one-on-ones can one person have? As I have a guess in my mind, because I've done a little bit of this math myself.
So at first, when people came up to me at DC BKK and asked to do this, there were two people and I was like, I'm not sure I really, really want to do it. So let's just start out and do a little beta. Like we'll do 12 sessions for $2,000 US for each of you guys. And that way I can see if I like it. And also it was a price where I felt very comfortable that I could deliver value, even if I'm just kind of finding my way. And I think that's also like, it's a lesson I've actually kind of shared with a couple of people at DC Black. I think it's really easy to launch something by calling it a beta. And that gives both yourself and everybody inside of it the expectation that there's going to be some kinks, so to speak. So you just downprice it and then you can go. So we did that for two people. They really got great results. They liked it. I was like, I think I like this thing as well. Then I think we bumped it up to, let's say, probably 3.5K US for 12 sessions. A couple more people joined, more people liked it. I bumped up to 5. Then I bumped it up to 8K for 12 sessions. And what also happened is, while this happened during COVID, like, again, let's talk about like timeline. DCBKK happens October 2019. Then in March 2020, the world started going upside down.
Yep.
And I was able to see that as an opportunity to give a lot of free value about how to control your mind, how to stay calm. And it was a unique situation where people were at home and they needed that. So it was actually like a very fruitful situation for myself with my skill set. And at the time, I was already doing one-on-ones, and I was running 8 free masterminds, 8 free mastermind groups concurrently with another DCer. There was just a way, like, let me just get the brand out there, so to speak. Like, my schedule looked crazy. And on top of that, we also ran actually a 4-week free DC offer for anybody in the DC. We're just going to run a 4-week coaching program. And then at the end of it, like, if anybody found value in this, you're welcome to reach out.
So this was like that 1,000-day period where you're just, it's a show.
It's like the best way I can describe it is like a violent amount of action. That was it. That was the goal. And my calendar, it was literally just packed from probably, we were stuck in Vietnam. We were supposed to be there just for a quick trip, and we got stuck there during COVID, me and my wife. And it was probably from 6 a.m. until around 8 or 9 at night with a little lunch break in between. I was just slammed with calls.
Wow.
Now, where I think I was also very fortunate is, if you remember, we had a podcast that we did, I want to say at the end of 2019, about pseudonyms and working undercover, you and I.
Oh, wow. And, I do remember that episode. We talked
do you
about
remember what I asked you at the end of it?
I do not. No.
So at the end of it, when we got off air, you were like, okay, cool. That was great podcast. Like, thank you. Wait, I want to ask you a question. From your experience, Dan, like, you've seen this, what do you think I need to do in order to make this a proper business? And I remember you were in the building site of the Philippines, and there were like little like wires going behind your head, and you're like,
sounds
okay, so
about right.
Yeah, like, you want to make sure that you're not just coaching people. You want to actually build a system, because if you build a system, that could grow beyond you. And again, like I've told you that, but I really appreciate you setting me on that trajectory, because from that point on, I wasn't just coaching people in a way where they arrived on the call and I was like, okay, so how are you doing today? What's going on?
Okay.
But I try to figure out what are the main principles, the main concepts that I think everybody should have in their mindset repertoire. And it became the one-on-ones. I never thought about them as me coaching. I always thought about them, these people are paying me to research the best possible mindset system in the world. And having that kind of frame also didn't make it seem like, oh man, I have another 12-hour day I have to get through. It's like, man, these people are paying me to do this research. This is amazing.
That is such an interesting switch for coaches who get burnt out.
Yep.
You know, it's like, we're going to get to the actual modeling, but if every call you go into and you're like, I'm refining the model.
Yep.
That's sick.
Like, it's been such a fun thing. Like, we want to create a YouTube video in the next month that, like, to say, like, basically, this is our dashboard. I got paid this many millions of dollars to write a book, because that's how I looked at it in a lot of ways.
Right.
Like, all this is just, you know, it's such a gift that this is what I get to do with my life, that I get to work with people and they pay me a generous amount of money. And this is just for me to actually figure out what is the best system in the world for mindset and performance. And it gives a lot of energy.
Well, we talked about marketing and sales stuff, but I think from a design perspective, going from 101, pretty much anyone listening who's an expert can put the shingle out for 101. Few make the jump to group. So I want to talk about, and then we're going to jump back to 101 too, which is a very cool conclusion. But how do we design a group program that works?
So you first do it on your one-on-ones. And that's what I mean. Like, when people would show up to the one-on-ones, they would get run through a curriculum. And I remember there were 2 DCers that I was coaching at the time. One of them said to me after a point, like, you know, I talked to her and she was saying that, like, oh yeah, it feels like he's running us through a program. So there was a gap between when I just started and when I launched the one-on-ones, where I basically had the program laid out and I was just running the one-on-ones through it individually. And then I was like, oh no, we should do this. This one doesn't work for everyone. This one works for sometimes. Like, but these seems to be the 6 main pillars of it. That if I could only do like 6 lessons, so to speak, or 6 workshops for everybody, these would be the best hits.
Interesting.
And yeah, and I hired a coach, and he was like, okay, you only get that to these 6 weeks. That's usually the amount of time that people are open to. Where they're like, okay, I can commit to this level of intensity for 6 weeks. And it doesn't seem like I have to commit for a year, but it's also not too short. It's kind of a sweet spot, what he saw in the marketplace. And we just launched it. We emailed the list. We had built a newsletter up until then. It was very small. I want to say we had maybe 500, 600 people on the newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very simple email like, hey, we're running a beta program. We're going to do the first group program ever. It's going to be the cheapest price that it'll ever be. And I'm also going to give people a lot of extra personal attention because I want to make sure this is a grand slam. We had 4 people, and I think the pricing on that, I want to say was $4,000 for the group program.
Okay.
And we also did an early bird that whoever signed up quick got it for $3,500. So it was just like, how can we get people in? We had 4 or 5 people in to sign up, I don't remember. And we were kind of off to the races after that. And it was really a build as we go because I had the ideas for the top 6 things, but I only built out the first workshop for the first week. Then I saw how they were going at it. And then I built a second workshop for the second week. Then build a third workshop live as we went. And I think the 6th workshop was we ended up scrapping it and building out something differently entirely.
Okay. So now the model for those listening along at home, it's like you kind of anchor your experience in one specific vertical that you can help people get from A to B. You offer 101. You workshop a system that you're playbooking, you're workshopping during your 101s. Then you move to this sort of sprint model.
Mm-hmm.
One of the pushbacks that I think a lot of people have about from going to 101, it's like, man, I can dig into your P&L for an hour and a half. And we just hang out. And a lot of times when you're on a 101 session, like some good comes out at like minute 90. Like I had a coaching session the other day that we like stayed for another half an hour because like the real stuff came out. And so I'm curious, how do you catalyze that kind of transformation in the group scenario? Or is it just something that you're going to have to let go of, that one-on-one attention?
You're going to have to let go of how broad you can go. If you give me anybody, I can figure out their mindset stuff pretty quickly. But with a group program, you have to have people that are all a similar starting point. Like if everybody comes with different problems, you're not going to be able to solve all their problems together. But if you can really nail in the avatar that you work with and clarify what is the exact problem you're coming to this program to solve, you can get that done.
Can you walk me through how it actually goes? Like, do they get an email a week in advance, 24 hours in advance? Do they show up to the call cold? These sorts of things. How much filling out of paperwork are you doing on the call? Walk me through what some of the best practices are for sessions that work.
So I can break down how we do it. My whole goal with this thing was to make it as fast as possible. I do not like the coaching programs that give unnecessary 40-page booklets or have all these, pre-whatever exercises. Like, what is the minimum effective dose? I know you're an entrepreneur. I know you're busy. It's the least amount of time necessary in order to get the results. So there's no pre-work. People show up to the calls cold. And during the calls, it's a live workshop where we actually have a live, basically, Google Sheet where they're working on. It's designed, it's nice, but I can actually see them working in real time. So I have a very big screen and I have the Zoom call over here. And on the other side, I have everybody's sheets and I can see what they're working on.
So you have information that not everybody on the call has. It's not global information.
Yes.
Interesting.
Because again, like my goal, like let's say, for example, you're on the call and we're working now, like the first workshop is clarity because that's where everything has to start.
Mm-hmm.
I can see if I feel like you're not getting the main thing because everything in the program is about theories of constraints. It's about, from a mental perspective, what's a theory of constraint, why you're not executing what somebody with your skill set should be achieving. And so I can see where like you're possibly getting stuck on or where you're kind of honestly like sometimes bullshitting yourself a little bit, either intentionally because it's uncomfortable or unintentionally because it's a blind spot. And that's where I pull people out and I'm like, hey, Dave, like you're not doing this part. Like in Q3, like this section, like what's going on here?
And you call out Dave in front of everybody and Dave's cool with that.
Yeah, Dave is cool with that because at the very beginning, and this was something really important that I learned, the very beginning of every workshop, I would set the tone and be like, guys, here's the truth. If you're here, and again, to get into the program is an application-only process where you have to actually have a call with me. And I said, like, if you're in the program, I want you to win. And if I want you to win, I'm going to exhibit tough love. And tough love, what it means in my perspective, not that I'm going to be mean or a jackass, but I'm going to say some things that could be really uncomfortable because I care so much about you winning. So let's agree that if I call something out here in the program, it's not because I'm calling you out. It's because it's me and you together against the part of you that is holding you back. Can we all have that agreement? And a thumbs up if we can all agree on that. And that buy-in and just preemptively like that allows me to go really deep, really quick with people. And I think they see that also, like, it's come from a place of caring. Like, I want these guys to win.
It's hard because I think for a lot of us, those secret desires for what our expectations are for ourselves, we don't have an ally at any given moment in life for those. And so saying it or writing it down can be extremely intimidating. And in kind of like the vaguely anonymous group setting, it could even be easier because, once you say it, well, then there it is. You have to contend with it. You have to deal with it.
Yeah. The public declaration. Yeah. But again, I'll put it again as a bit of an aside. I'm a big believer in positive pressure if it's done with a caring way. And the whole point, again, of this specific kind of program is to help people go to the next level.
They know they're signing up to lift weights.
Yes, yes. And then, like, beyond that, what I've experienced is a lot of people really dislike coaches because they recognize that they don't hold them accountable because the coach just wants to keep, like the client happy, so to speak. So I'm not going to challenge him. I'm not going to confront him on anything.
Yeah.
And I think that probably honestly works really, really well if you're working with like the coaching model where it's, some life coach in Bali who's charging, $70 an hour, and it's a lower tier of honesty, accountability, and like honestly, like entrepreneur, person, whatever you want to call it. But when you're starting to work with a really high level people, they want to be held accountable. They don't just want to win, so to speak. They want to do what winning requires, and they really appreciate somebody calling them out on it. I
always think of Troy Aikman. There's this story, this beautiful documentary about how pissed off he was when the new Cowboys coach came in.
Yep,
Barry Switzer, who was trying to be friends with everybody. And Troy Aikman wanted to win Super Bowls, man. That turns me on. I'm into that.
It's exactly that. It's exactly that. So it's like, if again, you can do it, there is definitely a way to hold people accountable to an extreme level of accountability and extreme care at the same time. And if you can just do both of those, happy days.
Okay. So one quick thing. I think a lot of people that want to go to one-on-one, to coaching, to retention, then to the high one-on-one model. This is the model we're laying out here. What I've seen is that they struggle with positioning themselves. I'm curious as to what are some effective ways to think about this? For example, what if you want to be a business coach, but you haven't run a business for 6 years? How do you find a way to offer proof to an audience and build trust if you're feeling that you're not there yet or you're insecure?
It's a great question. I'll break it down to two components what you said here. First off is the dealing with insecurity, the personal one, and then the credibility externally from people to want to pay you. The insecurity first, I think it's just something that people need to accept. That if you're outside of your comfort zone, you're in your growth zone, you're going to feel uncomfortable. Like I'm happy to say this on the podcast, for the one-on-ones, I charge 6 figures these days. It still feels uncomfortable when people pay me that. I'm like, really? You sure you want to pay me all that?
That's a boat, man.
Yeah. It's a lot of money. You know what I mean? And there's a pressure to perform at each call for these guys. And I think that's the one big thing. Like sometimes people ask, like, how do I not feel uncomfortable about it? Like you don't. You just feel uncomfortable and you accept that. It's like when you go swimming in the ocean and it's cold, you don't try to avoid the cold, just accept that it's cold. And this is a big part of it. With all this stuff, it's like all these tactics that we're going to share are irrelevant unless you're also willing to accept the discomfort emotion that's going to come with them. Mm-hmm. Like if you just want to do it at the pace where you're going to be always comfortable, it's going to go very slow. Now, on a tangible level, at the external level, how do you get people to trust you enough to be able to pay you this? I was, again, like very fortunate that somebody in the community, she's the lady who does the dragon boat races. She was really helpful, and she told me an interesting thing. She was like, Itamar, you never want testimonials. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you want case studies. I was like, okay, explain. She's like, testimonials are like, Itamar was really great. He was so helpful. He's the best coach. case studies are when I worked with Itamar, my business went from here to there. It went from 6 figures to 7 figures, went from 7 to 8, it went from 9 to multiple 9. Because when you have those results, it's not about you anymore. It's just about the product that you offer. And that's where other people can see like, oh, if he's gotten these results for these many people, I'm one of those people. He could get those kind of results from me.
Yeah.
And that's when I can also do the math in their head. They're like, oh, if I have, the guys that work with one-on-one, usually it's 8 or 9 figures. They're like, oh, if we have this kind of increase, that kind of payoff is worth it. And that's the probability. So I think that's how you get the external credibility and justification for other people to say this is worth it for them. And at the same time, the insecurity, it's part of the game, so to speak. It's part of growth.
I think we can all imagine what sort of limiting scale looks like with one-on-one calls. For every coach, it's different. Maybe 8 clients a month, 7. For some, it's going to be 4, depending on what you got going on. For some, it's going to be 15 if you're in that vicious, violent stage. What about for groups? Where did you start to reach the level that, like, hey, if we're doing 6-week sprints and we're charging 5 figures for 6-week sprints, this is about what we can handle as a company or as an individual?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. So that's also a choice. I decided to cap the groups at, I want to say it was 9 people per group. Because that's when I felt beyond that I can't actually see everybody's sheets and make sure that everybody's on point all the time. Now, at our big moments, it's usually around Q4 and Q1, where these kind of businesses are a bit more seasonal from what I've noticed. We sometimes run up to 3 cohorts at the same time. So there's 3 groups, like the guys in your group, you go with them the week 1 through 6. But in the background, like I'm running this group from 7 to 8, then the next group from 9 to 10, and so on and so on and so on. And I think the most I've ever done at one time was 4 cohorts simultaneously. And yeah, that seems to be something that's very doable. It's just that if I was going to do it consistently, I would also need to bring someone in to manage sales and all that. And that's probably where the current bottleneck is.
Gotcha. So let's talk about sweeteners then. So you sell the program, you basically you're really clear about A to B. You're really clear about filtering people coming in, 6-week sprint, you're going to get the result. We can visualize your process on the call. What about someone wants to hop on to touch up some stuff? What about them connecting with each other? What about Slack groups or extra benefits to joining the program? Do you add sweeteners at all?
Not really. There's at the 4-week mark, I usually hop on a 15-minute call with everybody just to make sure everything's going super well, et cetera, et cetera. They have the community. They're inside we created a school group, the one that Alex Hormozi and Sam Ovens promote. It's a great platform. We use that.
Okay.
And people connect with each other a lot. During the program, if somebody wants to hop on a call with me, they can pay a one-on-one fee. They get those options. But that's basically it. The whole goal, again, was I never wanted to create a system where they needed these sweeteners. The goal was for the system to be able to stand alone. Even as a book right now. The goal with the book is to put me out of business, so to speak. That was my real strive with it. If it could make me redundant. And so, yeah, there's no sweeteners. We don't have any swag. And the only thing that happens afterwards is that all the people that I think passed our criteria, that we have a standard kind of in the middle tier, you have to be about it. You have to really do the work. You have to be very honest and a very a good person. They get invited into our alumni community. And for the alumni community, they're basically a lifer there. And we do yearly free events for them. And a bunch of other things we do in the background for an alumni school group. But during the program itself, there's no sweeteners. We try to purposely make it this is not about the fluff. This is just about the work and the results.
So that brings me to one of the challenges of the group sprint model is LTV. I mean, you've solved it up front by having a high ticket price. What are some thoughts about, okay, now you've got this really powerful alumni group. They might not want to go back to the 6-week format with you. I'm curious as to what the double up rate is. And then what are some other ways that you could continue to drive value and revenue from the alumni group?
Yeah, so honestly, this is something that we're still figuring out. The initial 6-week program, the arena, rock solid, super happy with it. The ascension modalities is something that we've experimented with the past couple of years. And we're still kind of figuring out what's also the fit beyond just what makes money, but what do I also want to keep doing for life?
Yeah.
And I think this is a big thing. Like we did a more intense version, which was an ascension program, which was a weekly call for some people, and like a weekly group call. And it was a lot. Like every week I had to come up with new material, new workshops. How do we keep like improving this? It was basically an upsell, honestly, as far as like the per month membership. So I think it was $30K per year for these people. And, it was great because you have recurring revenue. It's also really cool because you can see people's progress, but it was also very taxing for me. And it was challenging every week to come up with a new piece of material that also added up to the previous week. And like there was momentum and progress and so on. We even ran a couple of in-person events. And I felt like this was something that I'm not sure that I want to keep doing like this. We also then tried a downsell program where instead of it being $30K a year, it was something, I want to say in the lines of maybe $4K a year. And instead of a weekly call, it was a call and a workshop. It was more just like an open Q&A once every 2 weeks, plus once a quarter kind of workshop to like figure out what your next goals are and so to speak and all that kind of jazz. And that also, like, people really like that program. But for me, I also was like, I don't feel like I'm making as big of a difference as I can with these guys. And it didn't give me that spark. So we also, let's pivot from that. And now it's at a point where we don't have a structured group program moving forward, but I'm open just to working with a lot of these guys one-on-one. And what happens is that a lot of times you do the 6-week program, and again, the whole goal is to get in the financial results. They sometimes take another like month or two to just kind of chill out. Then like, okay, now I want to go do one-on-ones. So it's something that we're still figuring out, and it's beyond just the finances of it, the sustainability of it for me. Because with coaching businesses, one of the most common themes that I've seen is that people scale and then they hate their life and then they quit. And the easiest way to stop winning is just to not want to play the game anymore. And that's something that I'm very conscious about trying to avoid.
Coaching businesses are so fascinating to me because unless you've achieved like a systemized or licensed scale, which is an interesting path to take, and I think
Traction.
some of the coolest businesses ever, like Traction is a great example where now you're licensing out your IP, you're certifying people, you're charging the coaches essentially, is one way to do it. The other way is to take a cut, which I've also seen that in there's Silicon Valley coaching firms that they simply take a margin on top of the coach, or they have there's a third model, which is a partnership model similar to like an accounting firm or a law firm where you bring in partner, like Itamar is such a great coach. Let's bring him in as a partner. He vets in and then he makes different profit margins.
Yep.
What's really interesting is part of the reason it's hard to find good coaches is that for a lot of good coaches, your entry fee doesn't make a financial dent. So I've noticed this, like a lot of really good coaches, they're just kind of maxed in terms of like what's meaningful for them. And so it's either like they're going to have this like really limited book of clients and it's going to be what it is, or they're going to get into the coaching business and start scaling things. So I think if you're sitting out there and you're saying, wow, a coach would be really great right now, it is kind of hard to find a good one because a lot of the people that would be great coaches, it's not really worth their time to do it. And so making it worth your time is a big nut to crack. Like you're saying, I had this thing, I showed up every week and it just wasn't worth my time.
Yeah, I feel like a douche for saying that it's not worth my time because it's a lot of money, but it's not that it wasn't worth my time. It's just that I felt like I could create bigger opportunities that also more aligned long term. Like it was just a short term hustle. It was every week I was just creating content and the clients were staying. But like you said, I wasn't building anything that was going to go beyond me at that point.
Mm-hmm. The other interesting piece I think that's interesting about the narrative you're laying out is this minimum effective dose concept where you're charging a lot and you're delivering in the arena 6 hours of live time.
Just to clarify, at the beginning of the week, there's the workshop where I see people's worksheets. Then they have 2 or 3 days to digest it. And then there's a live Q&A for 1 hour at the end of the week.
I see. So after they do the workshop, this is programmatic. I fill out my sheet. I'm scared, but I'm feeling motivated because I was in the room. with other people who are killers. Now I walk away for a couple days. I'm coming back to the Q&A to touch up, basically say, hey, I think I got it a little bit wrong. Do you feel comfortable with me adjusting it to this? Because I found the blocker or whatever.
So the way the Q&As also work, and again, that was kind of how it worked in the beginning. It was more free flow. Now it's to a point where for every Q&A, I have the one question that I need everybody to be able to answer. So if you're on workshop number 2, I need you to be able to answer this question. Did you get to what is your seasonal focus and what is your primary guardrail for this thing? If you cannot answer that, then I know that we messed up somewhere along the way, that we workshop it, like right there live. And yeah, I think people don't leave the workshops scared. They sometimes just leave it a bit like, ooh, that was a lot to like take in an hour and a half. And that just being able to sleep on it, it brings some other things to light sometimes. So that's when they can say, hey, I think I actually, while during the workshop, I didn't take into account this factor or that factor. Taking that into account, can you relook at my sheet? And that's what we do there.
I think a critical part to coaching like this, in my limited experience, is finding those easily presented questions that open up wide into this huge aperture of potential, and then asking the client to choose a path. So I will give an example and see if maybe you could bring one from your coaching program. So the primary job of a CEO is to increase equity or shareholder value of a company. How much is your company worth right now? And what is your methodology for getting there? How much do you need it to be worth or want it to be worth? What's the time frame for that? And what is preventing your company from being worth that much right now? So this is like a simple question. You don't even really need to be prepped for it. Like you could answer that question right now live for me. You can have these really kind of simple concepts that if you're held accountable to addressing the question, you can get all of your value just by being held to the standard of effectively answering the question for yourself. Most people listening to this haven't done that exercise. They don't know how much they want their equity value to be worth in 24 months, and they have no plan for it. But you could really get it done in like a half an hour. That's crazy.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Have you noticed that sometimes between the points where people pay you and the point where they start actually working with you, they make a ton of progress by themselves? It's an identity thing. When we all know these questions that we need to ask ourselves, right? Like, what is the business? What is the most effective thing I should be doing? What is not actually pressing this busy work? There's a certain thing when you put down money to join one of these kind of programs where all of a sudden you take on an identity, like, oh, I'm taking this seriously now. And like you said, most of these questions we know we need to ask ourselves. But now that I'm taking this seriously, now I'm actually going to do something about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it. Like with these programs, it's just the fact that someone pays money, they all of a sudden take themselves more seriously. It's that container, like you were saying.
It's also something to do with the relationship. Because, for example, sidebar, I am a member of some very well-structured programs online for how I can improve my jazz guitar or whatever. But now I've changed my relationship to a new coach who does exactly the type of work that I would like to do in my retirement, which is be a band leader at a particular type of, I imagine it as particular.
Nice.
And my preparation for this new engagement has been ridiculous. Like I've got 3 pages of notes with like audio examples and videos. And you're right. Like, cause I'm ready for this engagement, and it's something about delivering to him versus no one's watching me in my bedroom playing my guitar. So there's something about a relationship that is really powerful as well. Maybe you could say something about that, but also, do you have a question like from one of your sessions that has a similar effect that drives a lot of value for your clients?
This is also a question I also open up most of like my workshops when I do for like EO or whatever it may be. So I share a story where when I was working undercover in a certain country in 2011, my boss at the time, who was the best boss I ever had, he would open up every day with tabletop drills. And these were kind of a ways for us to both wake up a little bit in the morning and form a bank of mental answers in our heads so that if a situation came about, we would know exactly what to do without having to think about it. And at that day, we were working undercover and protecting a certain asset at that national airport. So he says, okay, Itamar, this is a situation. We're over here. The asset is to our right. And from your left, you see someone who is confirmed to be a terrorist. We have the intel. He fits the description. He's throwing at our asset something that you're 100% certain is a bomb. What do you do? And without thinking too much, being a very testosterone-driven 20-year-old, I said, confirmed terrorist, confirmed attack, I shoot to kill. And he said, Itamar, why would you do that? And it's just kind of like, I'm the most highest qualified combat operative on the ground. Bad guy. Shoot bad guy. And he was kind of looking at me, a bit disappointed. He's like, Itamar, why are you here? And I kind of bit my tongue because I understood that I wasn't getting anything. He was like, why would the government pay all the millions of dollars to train us and also put us here? He was like, is it to kill terrorists or to protect the assets? And I was like, it's to protect the assets. I said, great. So if someone's goal is to protect the asset, what should they do? And I said, okay, if someone's goal is to protect the asset, they should immediately evacuate the asset, then try to discard the bomb, and then, and only then, if they have time, to pursue the terrorists. He said, great. And it was such a big lesson that as soon as he externalized it, he said, if somebody had this goal, what should they do? The answer came like that. But when he just asked me, what should you do? All my biases came about. I was very competent at fire, like at warfare, whatever you want to call it. That was kind of my default behavior. And a lot of times when you ask entrepreneurs, okay, now imagine that it's 6 months from now and you were replaced by a CEO who is actually not as smart as you. They're super disorganized. They drink a lot. They show up late and they have newborn twins. But they took the company further than you. What must have been true in order to create that reality? What were the 1 to 3 things they would have done that would have made that possible? And
Great
what I
question.
found, and it's like that creates usually people see, okay, these are the 1 to 3 things that I should be doing that are actually going to drive results. And when I do that, usually about 5% of the room, they all of a sudden get this clarity that they never had before. And they're like, this is great, like full steam ahead. They're super excited, just ready to go. And the rest of the room splits in between people that they just came to this realization about what they should do, but they can immediately feel that kind of emotional resistance. They have a little mental block to it.
Yeah.
And the rest of them, they were like, I already knew this, but I've been avoiding it. And again, it just puts the truth of what are the actions that actually serve you best. So that's the question that I use a lot that I found to be very helpful.
Great question. It's one that I use too. I like your formulation better. Mine is, we visualize the most talented founder that they know, and then we ask them to put that person in your seat. So I like how you're actually inverting it and saying Joker comes.
Yep.
And it actually takes all the, because if you imagine the most talented person, you could easily discount that too and say, well, I don't have that person's talents. Yeah. But you're certainly better than Joker.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Like,
that's fantastic.
The thing is, you can work harder, you can work smarter, but you can also work braver. And most of the times we avoid the brave stuff because it's very emotionally uncomfortable. And the whole point of that question and the whole program is how can we get you to do the emotionally difficult things that most people avoid, because that could actually be where your edge is. Without being super clever, without being super smart, if you can just do the things that most people find emotionally uncomfortable, you can really win. Like, that's the point of that question.
One of the things people find the most emotionally uncomfortable is selling. Can you walk me through, or maybe you could start with the details of just how a sales call goes and what things work and what things don't?
So first off, I think it's really important to set the tone, and have it all be congruent to who you actually are and what your program is. Like, there's not a lot of small talk. It's like, here's the goal today. This is what I want to figure out. And the way I start every call is, the goal for me today is to understand like where you are and where you're trying to get to and see if the program is a fit for you. Because the reality is it's both an investment and there's 100% money back guarantee on it. So I want to make sure that you're the right fit in it so I don't waste my time and you don't waste your time. That sound good? Right. And we start with that intention in mind.
So you're just setting the solid frame.
Yeah, but also beyond that, the money back guarantee is also pressure on me that I don't want to just let everybody else and everybody into the program, because I don't want to deal with, like, if you're going to be part manager, you're going to be a dum-dum, and then at the end of the program, you're like, oh, this didn't work for me. Then, like, why did I waste my time here?
Okay. I love that.
And then it's basically understanding, again, like, what is the goal? They usually tell you what the actual goal is, why they're here, why they're on the call. And then you ask them, like, why aren't you doing it? And if they give a reason that's, like, very valid, they're like, listen, man, like, we just went bankrupt and this is all the financing we do. And you're like, well, I can't help with this. Or they're like, I just need to know how to build a sales team or how to build, like, the recurring back end sales of this process. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not what I do. Let me just try to refer you to somebody else. Then we stop there. But if you recognize, and I kind of walk them through similar questions like we just did, and recognize they know what they should do, they know how to do it, but they're just not getting themselves to do it, then we recognize, okay, this is actually what I help people with. And from there, we progress. And they recognize, like, oh, okay, and then my goal is in that session to be able to explain to them their problem in a clear way than they've ever been able to understand it. They're like, this is exactly what's going on in your head. This is the exact mental block you have. This is how you formed it. And this is exactly where it's holding you back. And then they're like, damn, okay, I recognize I need to solve it. And that's where you have to resist the temptation to try to solve it for them on the call and say, great, would you like to work together? Because also, truthfully, what I've learned is that it both can ruin the sale, but also can ruin their success. Because even if you give somebody the insight of how to solve it, so to speak, on that call, but you don't provide them the frame of accountability for 6 weeks to actually get through it, they'll have the insight, but they won't take the action.
Makes sense.
It's one of those things where it's, yeah, you try to avoid that for logical reasons.
Now, from reading your book, insert a little bit of your concepts here. My guess is that there's only a few options. They're going to fall into one of just a few buckets. Do you mind sharing? It's now available to the public for a great price. It basically, everybody comes to the call, and because you're so filtered down, it's just one of 3 diagnoses, essentially.
Yes, like in a really, really high level. So the whole question we have, like on the podcast and the book, is could somebody else with your exact skill set achieve more than you currently are? Because if you could say yes to that or even think of a person, that means your mindset is holding you back. And that's kind of our basic question to filter people. And I think that was a stroke of luck, just doing podcasts. And like somebody asked me, how would you define mindset for somebody? Like, that's the question. And then we recognize that a lot of people like click with that. So we're like, okay, great, this is the filter.
So I just want to underline that, how elegant that is in terms of program design, filtering, and the A to B process of a group coaching.
Yeah.
I think it's a very cool framework. A clarifying question. If the answer to the clarifying question is yes, in this case, then there's one of 3 constraints.
Yeah.
Typically.
So basically, the reason you're underperforming is because everybody thinks that, like the whole pressure makes diamonds, that the more pressure you feel, the better you perform. The reality is that's not true. It's like a bell curve, kind of like we explained in the book, that there's a certain point where you feel too much pressure, and then your performance starts to dip. And you get this sense of anxiety or overwhelm or just analysis paralysis. And that pressure is 9 times out of 10 caused by fear. Because again, like you should be able to accomplish this with your skill set, but you're just equating more. You're putting more emotional weight onto this thing. And the harsh reality, the unfortunate one, is that we're not logical creatures, we're emotional ones. Because we developed, we evolved 100,000 years ago, we evolved in the savannas, and we were just wired to survive. So the 3 main success killers that kind of drive these pressure spikes are 1, when you try to avoid uncertainty. So again, makes perfect sense from a biological perspective. 100,000 years ago, if you're the way from the hut to the watering hole, there's some rustling in the bushes, that could be a predator. Any kind of uncertainty feels dangerous. So whenever you sense a bit of uncertainty with this I'm going to launch a new program, I'm going to grow the business, I'm going to talk to this employee, your cortisol spikes.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you underperform. I don't remember which year of DCBKK this was. I think you guys had us like basically just talk to the person next to you, meet them, the person behind you. And one of the people behind me, we were chatting, and he was saying, I'm really unsure about what to do with this, and that's why I think it's a problem. And I was like, what if that's not an actual problem? You're just unsure. You don't have to be afraid of it. And he was like, that's interesting. And like, that was all he needed, for example. And you could tell he was super excited and he would get on his way. That's success killer number one.
Yep.
The second one is that you optimize for approval. So again, we're tribal creatures. We grew up in tribes of, let's say, 50-ish people. And if people didn't approve of you and you might get kicked out of the tribe, you might be dead alone by yourself. Yeah. So this is the whole, I'm not going to take action unless everybody's happy with it. Unless this is not going to upset anybody. We talked about this in person about how sometimes it's more important to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission.
Yep.
And these kind of people, when that fear of optimizing for approval gets in the way, you cannot do that. It really hurts your success.
There's a very interesting, it might be useful to people to go down like the personality disorder and or extreme personality rabbit hole on this one to understand how illogical this whole thing is, that when you see like, the percentage of CEOs that are sociopaths is X. Why is that? Well, because they're not hindered by this particular fear, which is a big success killer.
Yeah, and you said a beautiful thing there. It's an irrational thing and they're not hindered by it. Again, we're not logical creatures, we're emotional ones. And I think the biggest step to success is to accept that and acknowledge that. That there will always be a part of me that is rational and knows what I should be doing, because I can do that exercise and tell what somebody else they should do. And there's going to be that part of me that's always fearful. And that's the part that's going to win that war within, like why we titled the book, the subtitle of it, The Win the War Within. That's the war within. Between the advice you can give somebody else in your position and you being able to actually take it. Because you're not afraid and you can overcome this voice in your head that's not going to disappear, but can be managed, so to speak.
What is the third success killer?
So we said you avoid uncertainty, you optimize for approval, and the third one, which is kind of similar to the second one, is that you seek validation. So optimize for approval is that like we're moving, but like guys, wait, let me make sure. Is this okay with you? Are you okay? Are you happy? Everybody happy? Everybody good? The seeking validation is that before you even try, you need to get permission. This is like, I won't launch this thing until this is in place. And it's again, one of those things that comes from this fear of being rejected by the tribe, which again, like you said, is completely irrational. Because these days, even if your tribe, your closest family members reject you, you can find other people in the world. It's not the same situation. And I think again, just accepting a lot of stuff with this fear, the uncertainty, the approval, the validation. It's letting go of that fallacy that you can avoid these things and succeed. I think of that documentary we're talking about with Jerry Jones and Troy Aikman. I think Jerry Jones literally said, one of the reasons I've succeeded is because I can live with ambiguity when most people can't. He can live with uncertainty. So it's accepting there's going to be uncertainty. There's going to be some people who don't validate what I do. And the more we can just accept these things as a baseline, as a requirement for success, that's when we can actually take the most direct path to success instead of like zigzagging around these things and doing ineffective things.
The other thing that you have an interesting triad in the book of performance traps, and you have really nice presentations of simple and not too many concepts that I feel like I can now tack some content onto these things. But there's nice guy, go harder guy, and there's prove you wrong guy. And, I feel like I'm all three. So can you lay out how I have all these performance traps?
Yeah. So I'll put it this way. Everybody feels a mix of some. So for some people, it's a mix of two. For some people, it's a mix of three, but there is one dominant one for everyone.
Okay.
So basically, again, you feel those fears or success killers, like the uncertainty. That uncertainty makes you feel a certain level of pressure, like, ooh, there's a lot on the line here. And then everybody has their way of underperforming, so to speak, when they fall off the bell curve. So for some people, when they start feeling emotionally overwhelmed, there's a lot of pressure, their emotional response is to just go harder on everything, because that's how it can create some certainty. It's like, it's not logical because I'm working on things that actually don't make a difference. I'm teetering on burnout, so I can't think strategically. But if I can just work and do a lot, at least it gives me a feeling that I have a sense of control.
It's like I'm stressed about this business. Let's call everybody in for an all hands and just do 12-hour days for 2 weeks.
Great example. I wish I would have put that in the book. That's a great example. The challenge with all these performance strategies, to go harder, and the other ones we'll get into, is that there is value in them. They do provide you value, and they can take you a certain way. But if you don't know how to harness these gifts of being able to go hard, for example, strategically, then it burns you out.
Yeah.
So it's about being able to differentiate between when am I going hard because I have a deadline in a week and I know exactly what to do and I just need to go into execution mode versus I just feel a bit panicked. So I'm emotionally soothing myself by just going hard.
Easy to relate to. So we got nice guy and Mr. Prove You Wrong as well.
Yeah. So the Mr. Nice Guy, this is the person that doesn't think about win-wins, but their emotional default whenever things feel overwhelming is how can I make sure everyone's taken care of? Everyone's super happy with me.
Yep.
So they undercharge, they over-deliver, they sacrifice themselves. And again, like with these guys, they're phenomenal relationship builders. But what I've seen is that it usually creates a blowout at the end of the road because they pent up a bit of resentment.
I'm carrying this cross. And then eventually, like clockwork, you're going to be pissed about it. You're going to harbor anger.
I don't really have much of the Mr. Nice Guy in me. I've always been very practical about this stuff. And I think that's also why, and Emil, honestly, the person we spoke about at the beginning, he said a great sentence to me back in the day. He was like, never charge a price that you'll be resentful to fulfill for clients.
Yep.
And that's always been the perspective. If this is not anything in the business, if it's not a win-win, we don't do it.
Totally. Prove You Wrong. I feel like this person's on Facebook somewhere.
Many of them, yeah. So, I had this as well. Like I talk about also in the book about some of my failures in the military and how shattering that was to my ego at the time. And a lot of times that desire to prove either to yourself or to other people that you're a better version of your younger self or whatever it may be, it can be rocket fuel. But the problem is that it can also take you in the wrong directions because instead of optimizing for what would be the most effective path to get the results that I say that I want for my business, you subconsciously end up optimizing for what would prove that I'm really smart or really capable. So you actually create these products that are really complex and unnecessary.
Yep.
Like there's somebody in the community, I won't mention the name, we both know him, but super smart guy, like incredibly gifted guy. And he had this program where it was just so elaborate that everybody went through the first 10% of it and they're like, this is amazing. But nobody was able to get past that. Because subconsciously, he didn't recognize that he was actually just optimizing to showcase his knowledge, to prove a point of how great he was, instead of just being, what's the best shortcut I can possibly take? So what's to prove you wrong, guys, I'll say this. If this resonates, that you feel like, I have this chip on my shoulder, that's what actually my drive. Here's the good news. Nobody has found out how to unwind habits with a snap of their fingers. So if you're in the habit of working really hard, of pushing through, of being able to, show resiliency, if you just take that chip off your shoulder, you won't get lazy all of a sudden. You'll just be able to drive it better. And like that was the case for me because I had this belief that the only reason I'd succeeded since that failure was because of this chip on my shoulder. And now you're like telling me to let go of what actually got me here. And that was terrifying.
Yep.
However, like what I saw is that I didn't lose my work ethic or my grit that I'd earned through like multiple things since then. But all of a sudden, I wasn't just driven haywire by this need to prove a point. I could start taking shortcuts to success, which ends up like you can do that and just create more success and more success. Those are the three main performance traps.
We talked about, LTV, back to the model. As a theory, we've talked a lot on the show about the cappuccino machine. 100 people walk in to buy the cup of coffee. One person walks in and wants to buy the machine. And you've actually done this by saying you can join the arena. It's going to be a 6-week sprint. Or guess what? Now I've gone through the arena. I've become who I've become in terms of my stature in the business space. Now, if you want to do one-on-one with me, that's going to be $100,000 a year. Talk to me about the creative spark for this, some uncertainties you faced around it, and maybe how it's rolled out and what it looks like now.
When I was charging, I want to say around $8,000 for 12 sessions back in the day, I was connected with another coach who was at the time charging $30,000 for 12 sessions, which I thought was astronomical. And we talked for about half an hour. He was very gracious. And then at the end of it, I asked him, okay, so like I told you my results. I've told you what we do. What do you think I need to change in order to be able to charge that amount? He said, all right, so here's what you need to do. You need to first off work with an American audience that are making more than $250,000 a year, because the American audience is familiar with coaching, like what we talked earlier about. They're aware that this is a problem that needs a constant solution to.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and here's the deal. If you've gotten people these results, what you need to change, the one big thing, is that when people ask you how much it is, you tell them it's $30,000 for 12 sessions. And that's it. Which blew my mind, at the time. And it was kind of true. Like, I didn't jump immediately. I think I went to 12 to 15 to 20 and then to 30. But like literally one person, like I tried it every sales call and people weren't resisting. So I was like, this is wild. And they were still like happy and recommending it to other people. The 100K, I think it still had a bit of a, it's like a bigger figure. And I had that belief that I'll be ready to do that when. It was like my performance trap of seeking validation. That when I have this New York Times bestseller or when I have this giant brand, then I can do that. And the marketplace will respond. However, the co-host from my podcast one day, he just showed me like, hey man, have you ever seen this guy? And I'm not going to say names, but he's another person in the online space. And he had on his website that he was charging 100K per year to do it. And it looked like he was getting people into it, because they had a couple of people that said, I work with him one-on-one, da-da-da. And honestly, it was just one of those things. If that guy can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
I know my stuff is better than his. So like, if he can do it, I can do it. And that's honestly what prompted that.
Drilling down into the ICP pool is really important. And the other piece is benchmarking and then positioning against a benchmark. That's a way that you can theoretically lay out what it looks like. Here are the benchmark coaches that charge $100,000 a year. Here's how we counter position. And the reason I love this technique and this idea is that it's math. If you've coached 100 students at $10,000, one of them wants to do it for $100,000. That's math.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. It's a great perspective.
You can put it on a spreadsheet. It's guaranteed. I guarantee it. You're going to like the way you look. Okay. Final piece. We're running long. This has been so much fun. We have so much to talk about. I want to end the interview with this concept of, it is a little bit related to therapy. We're talking about mindset. I walked away from the book thinking about this concept of a limiting belief.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the takeaways for me. I'm wondering if you could bring us into the world of how you recognize the concept of a limiting belief and what we can do about them.
So I think where most people get confused about limiting belief is that they don't understand that limiting means there's a certain context to it. What is it limiting you from doing? And that's really important. Most people, when they say, okay, let's work on our limiting beliefs, they'll randomly say, what's the most negative thing you think about? Or what makes you really sad? And they start trying to randomly find things from their past and be like, maybe there's some bad stuff here, which oftentimes happens in therapy. The way I look at limiting beliefs, again, from a theory of constraints perspective, is this the bottleneck to you executing on your bigger future? So what we have to do in order to get there is that the last thing we can do in this process is actually look at your beliefs. First, we got to figure out what you really want out of life. Then we got to boil that down into what needs to be your focus for the next season. Just the one vertical that you want to improve on, whether it's something small inside the business, big in the business, something in your personal life, whatever it may be. Then the next step is to do that most direct path exercise where we did, where like, if somebody had this seasonal focus, what would be the most effective way for them to achieve that? We do that. Then we recognize where you're trying to get to. Then before we even get into the beliefs, we try to figure out, are there valid reasons why you shouldn't do this that could restrain you from doing this? And that's where you put in the guardrails, right? Because a lot of times you figure out, okay, this is the thing I should do. And then you hear a voice in your head, but I don't want to not have a relationship with my wife anymore. I don't want to miss out on time with the kid. And a lot of times they're very simple structural solutions. Like, hey, just put 2 date nights a week in your calendar. Like, hey, just hire a personal trainer, have 3 sessions a week in the gym with him. And you can pacify those voices of concern. It feels great. You can just focus on what you actually need to focus on, which is really the goal with this whole performance stuff. So we do that. And then also to add on to your ability to perform, we cut away all the performance anchors. Basically an audit of your life of what are the things that are draining you that you're aware of and that you're perhaps not aware of, but actually not contributing to the goal. Now that we've done all that, we know where you want to get to. We know the most direct path to get you there. And we've removed all the reasons logically why you shouldn't do it. Now and only now have we gotten to a point where we can figure out, why do you believe this to be a bad idea?
I thought it was interesting is the element where you introduce a proofing element to this. Can you describe that?
A lot of times people say, okay, once you find the limiting belief, what's a more positive belief you can have? And it's kind of this whole motivational speaker nonsense. And my approach is that the rational people that I work with, in the heat of the moment, they're not going to do what feels positive. They're going to do what they think is the truth. So instead of saying this is just a limiting belief, what's a more positive one? We're saying, okay, this is the belief you hold. Let's falsify it. Let's see if it's actually true or not. If this is actually just something that you thought was how the world works, but it doesn't, or it actually is. For example, gravity. That is the truth. Do not jump from the building. That will always be a bad idea. However, if you believe that, for example, that if I reach out to people, I'll be ridiculed, let's stress test that. Let's stop for a second. Like, let's ask, first off, where did you learn that to be true? What situation caused you to think this way? It's like, oh, kids made fun of me once when I was 11 because I moved to a new town and I tried to tell a joke. Okay, great. And that's a true example from an actual, like, somebody that was in the DC.
Yeah.
And say, okay, so is it always true that if you reach out to people that they're going to reject you because you're socially awkward? And it's one of those things where you can just break people's belief structure, the internal resistance they weren't even aware that they had. And the biggest breakthroughs, I think, that we've seen in the program aren't because we've helped people do something new, but they've just given themselves permission to finally actualize their skill set because that belief isn't holding them back anymore.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me too, because it's like a best practice model of what you would do in a therapeutic situation, but it's really boiled down to like, let's stress test this internal narrative around this particular constraint. So I think that's a cool takeaway. The whole process is available in the book. You can read it in one sitting and you can do the process right on the tail end of it and get started. It's cool. We appreciate you writing it and appreciate your time here today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. And again, I've said this to you offline, but I really greatly appreciate what you and Ian have built with the DC. It's like I shared here, I wouldn't have had this business right now that I'm extremely grateful to have if it wasn't for that DC BKK.
Sick. Our pleasure, man. All right, cool. That's the podcast. Thanks for joining us.